Awesome. All right, Mr. Phil, good to see you, bud. How are you?
Awesome. How are you?
I am doing very well. Thank you for joining me today. Appreciate it. I know you're a busy guy from all the things that you are navigating in your personal life and professional life, but today, as I was mentioning kind of offline here, you are the person that I think about when it comes to building a network, really the opportunities that go behind that. And so I really wanted to pull on some threads today. Really wanted you to share your experience about how others can really get into the networking game, get into the community game, because I've seen it work wonders not only in your life, but in other people's lives as well. So
For
before we
sure.
get going, can you just tell the people who you are, what you do, and where they can find you?
Yeah, for sure, man. Thank you for having me. So my name's Phil Pelto, and I am a husband, a father, a runner, an entrepreneur, an adventure seeker, and just really trying to live life to the fullest and learn how to navigate this crazy thing we call life. So my businesses are really all around developing connection and relationship and helping people get more sales from referrals. So I've got Certus and Firestorm. And we're those things on all the socials, Certus, Professional Network, and Firestorm, and then me, Philip Pelto, all the social stuff there. So I'm actually the only one of me in the world, which is kind of crazy. Like I can never run for public office because if you Google my name, it's just all me that
Is
comes
that
up.
right? That's funny.
Yeah,
That's rare. I can't say that about a Nathan Johnson, but
yeah,
that's good to know that you are unique because obviously you are, but the name sticks with it.
yep.
What is the difference between Firestorm and Certus, just for the audience?
Yep. So B2B versus B2C. So Firestorm is all B2B, Certus is all B2C. And the delineation, because I know sometimes it gets a little wonky and confusing.
Mhm.
Who's cutting your check? Who is it a business or is it a individual? So
Okay.
yeah.
Gotcha. Love that. So I have to ask this because I know I put this in the preliminary questions here, but are you an extrovert or an introvert?
So I would kind of cut it in the middle, say ambivert.
Nice.
And yeah, I am obviously a trained extrovert. I can work a room, I can go out and talk to people, and I have
Yeah.
no problems with that.
Yeah.
I think my natural state, like where you recharge your batteries and draw energy from, is
Mhm.
from being alone.
Okay.
So yeah, it's kind of a weird, line that I walk, but
That's well, so one you went where I was hoping you would go because I was going to ask, are you trained to be an extrovert just based off your businesses, which you answered that question. But now it actually, for me, makes sense knowing you personally and your adventure seeking, your long runs that you do. That's kind of how you recharge.
yeah, yeah,
Do,
yeah,
do
100%.
you feel like you've been able to train yourself to draw energy from the connections of the businesses, or is it still kind of a drain for you overall?
I mean, there's definitely some energy that I draw from it,
Hmm.
and I love people's stories,
Hmm.
and I like learning about new industries and learning about how you came to do what you do, and so there's a lot of fun, interesting things that come out of that.
Yeah.
But it is still like emotionally and mentally draining to participate in those conversations, and especially because most people, and my wife and I were just talking about this recently, most people are not good conversationalists. They're
Hmm.
not trained to ask questions.
Hmm.
And so, it's like you're the one that has to keep driving the conversation, keep coming up with, new and interesting questions to keep things rolling and make it seem natural. And you kind of anticipate, well, we're at this point in the conversation, they should ask this and they're not. So
Yeah.
I'm just going to go ahead and offer that information to keep it going. But, at the end of the day, you're like, dang, like I'm the one that was like, I was answering and then I was like preemptively answering a question I thought they should ask and
Yeah.
and then getting them to say something, yeah, so it's a lot.
Yeah, it is for me too, and I love this conversation because selfishly, like I've wanted to have this with you for a while because I am that person, right? Like it's as a business owner, it's taken me a little bit to get to the point where it's like, hey, this is a necessity, right? We have to go out, we have to build community. But I had to be really intentional around building my community. And I'm very appreciative of your support, kind of your network, the companies that you've been able to build, because it helps people specifically like me just say, hey, I need to go make connection. And we're going to create these really nice environments. We're going to go in, it's going to be warm. I may not know, as an example, like what's the next question I need to be asking, but it's kind of like a training environment for me, if you will.
Yeah.
What are let's state the obvious benefits of community and networking. I think that's good just to kind of lay the foundation there. But then I kind of want to take it to where it's, have you been able to recognize with your businesses over the last couple of years where, people can really thrive once they get into those communities and those networks?
Yeah, totally. I mean, so well, you said state the obvious. Like if you're a business person and you're thinking about networking as a strategy for growing your business, the obvious end game is that I'm going to get more sales, top line revenue from these partnerships.
Mhm.
But when you peel back the layer of the onion a lot, you've got all these other connections that you can provide as resources to your clients, to your friends, to your family. If somebody needs an accountant or they need an attorney or, I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've been in a conversation and somebody is like, oh, I have this issue that I'm dealing with at work and da da da. And, I was unjustly fired. And I'm like, oh, you need an employment attorney. Like I know somebody, or I can call somebody to get a referral to that person.
Mhm.
Or anything with your house, like you need a new roof or you need windows or, whatever. Like I've got resources for all that stuff that people that are, trusted, they've got a track record, other people in the network have used them. And so that's a huge benefit. And then just from a community aspect and feeling like you're, entrenched in your local community. I mean, especially nowadays when, everything is it's so easy to be remote and like,
Mhm.
you don't have to leave your house if you don't want to.
Yeah.
You can get stuff delivered, you can do Zoom calls, you can sell stuff, you can run a business, almost entirely on the internet. You don't have to ever walk out your front door. And I think having some people that you can connect with and like, share things that are going on in your life and just, hey, what the business is doing this and I'm feeling this way. And, having those conversations is super important. And, I think a lot of people take that aspect of it for granted. And yeah, so there's a million benefits to it.
Yeah, no, and I really like that because that was actually the position I was in. So I used to work for Hewlett Packard, right?
Mhm.
I moved from California over to into Colorado, over in Denver here, which is basically when you and I connected. But I was working remote. I don't drink, I don't go to the bars. I'm a family man. I've got a wife and some small kids, so I'm not going out to these places where, in my younger years, in my 20s, it was a lot easier to meet people, right? It's just this day and age, specifically with all the technology, you're connected all the time, but you're really not connected. And I
Yeah.
just came to this place where I was like, hey, I have to build a network and it's going to take some intentionality behind it. And it's interesting because for me, it happened my late 30s, but I'm almost wondering, do people figure this out early in life sometimes, or is it just kind of whatever personal journey they're on? And then it's like, hey, all of a sudden I need this, I need to figure out where to make friends. And these networking type businesses and events really help that take off.
Yeah, I think I mean the short answer is it's all over the board. Like there's people that figure it out when they're 5 and there's people that figure it out when they're 50. And
Mhm.
it doesn't really matter when that, epiphany happens, as long as you understand like here's what I'm trying to do and here's, how I go about doing it.
Yeah.
And it is harder when you're older, like there's not as many built-in things, ways for you to connect with people. When you're younger, you've got school and, you're going to high school or college or whatever it is, and you're going out to the bars, you're going, doing sports or you're doing all these other things where there's a lot of just, serendipitous ways to bump into people.
Mhm.
And then when you're married and you've got kids and you're, kind of working from home, like you said, that's like you're in a totally different world and you
Yeah.
don't really have any of that stuff. So it definitely is more challenging, but that's one of the reasons I love going out and talking to younger folks, whether it be a high school class or college or, young professional clubs, and like talking about the benefits of work because, those relationships that you start in your 20s, you're going to have those for the rest of your life a lot of times. And those people go on, they might, be a nobody when they're 20 and then they go on to be the CEO of some
Yeah.
huge company or they found a company that goes on to do amazing things and or they're working in the State Department or whatever it is like people their lives go on these really interesting paths and if you can start those relationships early and maintain them throughout your life it's a lot easier to have a far-reaching network versus, when you're 50 and you're like, oh, I'd really love to like go meet the CEO of Apple. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, good luck, man.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying it won't happen, but
Yeah.
like, if you knew that dude from, grade school, it's a
Mhm.
lot easier.
Yeah,
So,
no, I really like what you said about the longevity, and actually that touches a number of things on the personal side as well. Do you see, just from the various relationships that you've built, the people that you've met, do you find that there are certain types of people, like personalities, that do well in these environments versus others?
um, short answer is no. I think there's an idea that people might have that, like, oh my gosh, like I have to be extroverted and I have to be a salesperson and I have to be a, um, you know, pick your favorite, personality profile. I've got to
Yeah,
be the outgoing, salesy guy that, personality type to in order to make this work and be beneficial. And that's not true.
yeah.
And I think a lot of times those are the people that struggle to build relationships and connection because they like to talk so much,
Hmm.
and they've always got a story and they're trying to one up people, and the people that are a little bit more reserved and like to listen,
Yeah, yeah,
probably wind up doing a little bit better. So
yeah,
but yeah, it's all over the board, and I think you'll attract people that are like you, and you'll find those groups where you feel comfortable, and it doesn't have to be it doesn't have to look like anything. You can look like whatever you want. You go find the people that are beneficial to what your goals are. So,
yeah.
yeah.
It's kind of interesting that you actually ended on that point because I was thinking about this before we jumped on, and I mean it's kind of like anything else, even though nobody really talks about it, or at least I haven't heard a lot of people talk about it, but it's a little bit like dating, right? It's like you're gonna meet a ton of people, and you got to find your tribe. You can't just like walk into one event. There has to be some longevity behind it. You have to almost train yourself to a degree. What questions can you refine your pitch? Can you refine your introduction? Are you asking the right questions? So there was something that I heard the other day. I was listening to a podcast and somebody said basically like treat this like your job, but it was actually he was referencing sleep because I've been doing a lot of like
Okay.
deep sleep stuff. And so he was like, treat sleep like your job. Like, how would you prepare for it? How would you set yourself up to make sure you knock it out? And I've kind of tried to apply that across the board. Something like
Hmm.
this popped into my mind where it's not natural for some people. They know, hey, I need to go meet more people. They walk into a room maybe one time and it's like, ooh, this was kind of uncomfortable. I didn't know what to say, or I didn't meet the right people. What would you say to that? Does it take a little bit of time?
Well, it takes time, but to your point about planning, it takes a lot of intentionality and finding the right group of people. So, I've been doing this for a long time, and I feel like I have kind of it's second nature to me, where I can look at an event description and figure out between who's putting it on and what they're talking about. This is good or not. And a
Interesting.
lot of people don't have that experience level where I've gone to tens of thousands of events. So I think one of the things is figure out what's the goal. What are you trying to do? Are you trying to make friends? Are you trying to make business connections? Are you trying to sell something? Are you trying to get network for a new job? Are you trying to figure out are these people that I want to travel with? And whatever that is, like
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't matter what the goal is. Just figure out what that goal is
Yeah.
before you go to the event, and then you can kind of pick the events that are going to be more appropriate for achieving your goal. And so you've kind of narrow it down. Okay, these are events that are in line with what I'm trying to do. If it's a business event, you're like, okay, you got the Chamber of Commerce, you've got associations, industry associations, you've got business groups like the one we're in.
Yeah.
There's all this stuff, and you can kind of pool that together, and then you can kind of weed through it and say, well, based on these factors, I think this one would be a better use of my time than the other one, and get real intentional and strategic about it. And then then it's just a little bit of trial and error. You're like, okay, I got the general gist of it right. Now
Yeah.
maybe I just need to find some better event organizers or something like that.
Yeah.
So yeah.
No, those are really good. Those are really good tips. And I think I probably should have done a much better job of that. When I've approached, obviously, as I'm sharing this, I'm realizing how much I feel like I've learned in a short amount of time when it comes to networking. Do you as the owner of the organizations, right? And you like you said, you've been to tens of thousands of events. What are some things that people really lack walking into it outside of intention?
I mean, that's probably the biggest one is, they've heard somewhere from someone that they need to network, and they think that that is like, oh, I just need to go to this event. And so they walk in with like no idea of who are the attendees, who's putting it on, what am I doing here? And a lot of times people just walk in and they're overwhelmed because maybe there's a lot of people there, and then they wind up, going hitting the bar, or they find one familiar face and they just stick and talk to that person the entire night, which
Yeah.
just totally defeats the purpose of being at an event.
Yeah.
Um, and I think a lot of times, if like yourself, you said you're a little bit more of an introvert, not
Yeah.
sure. Like, you don't have to meet everybody at the event. If there's 100 people there, like, you're not going to meet 100 people. That's just not realistic.
Yeah.
So you just need to set a goal and say, okay, I'm okay if I meet two new people. Like,
Hmm.
that's it. If I get two new conversations, two new business cards, whatever, I can feel good about that event, and you can leave.
Yep.
And that's setting some chunk down, like, realistic, achievable goals when you go into it is important. And then understanding, like, what am I trying to accomplish? Am I trying to have a conversation with somebody to figure out, if they're a potential client? Is it a potential partner situation? Because all of those things are valid reasons to be at an event. But if you don't know why you're having the conversation, then it doesn't really, there's no direction to it, and it feels forced and, very superficial and kind of cheesy. So,
Yeah.
yeah,
I love the intentionality and the goals. That's definitely something I've tried to be better about. And I was going to ask you about the number of people because I think it's really important, right? My wife is she actually gains energy. Like her batteries recharge when she talks to other people. And I'm the
yeah,
complete opposite, right? I'm like, what questions do I need to ask? Like, how long is this conversation gonna go? And so I know there's a lot of people probably in the middle, but I've also heard it's a struggle for people like me that go into an event. And so I actually have a goal. I walk in and I say, okay, I need to meet 3 to 5 new people, but the conversations can't be superficial, right? It's not
hmm,
what's it doing outside. It's more than just like, what did you do? And my
yeah,
wife's actually been coaching me in the background. Hey, ask somebody, what was the best thing that happened to you this week? Or tell me about your family, or what was the best vacation that you had? So you actually open up the door and get people talking, which ironically, for somebody who is an introvert, it's a great tactic because you're asking one question and then you're letting a lot of people talk, right?
yeah.
And I've seen that really work well with other people.
Yeah, 100%. And yeah, if you can come up with a couple of good questions, people love talking about themselves. And so just ask a couple of good questions and let them run with the conversation. And, interestingly enough, people will leave those interactions feeling like, oh my gosh, that was the best conversation I had. Nathan is such a great conversationalist. And, like,
Yeah.
you said nothing. You just asked them a question and let them talk about themselves.
Yeah.
So,
Well, I like it when people say things like that.
yeah.
Um, I'm assuming you have mostly business owners. What other types of people typically go to your events that join your companies?
Yeah, for us, it's we're very much business development focused.
Okay.
So, 70% of the people that are members or attendees are business owners, and the other 30% are salespeople for larger organizations. But they're all selling something, and they're trying to develop good partnerships and figure out, how can we serve each other? How can I use you as a resource to help my clients and my partners? And how do all the puzzle pieces fit together so we can, sort of have a rising tide raise all ships, right?
Yeah.
And make sure that we're looking out for each other. But yeah,
Yeah.
it is very much business development focused versus some other places you might go. It's more about a business support group where
Okay.
it's a mastermind group, or you're having different conversations to problem solve. We're very much focused on the sales side of things, and just
Gotcha. That makes a lot of sense. And the other thing that I've kind of taken away as I've gone to events too is I use it as an opportunity to work on some of my specific skill sets. So not being a salesperson, also being a business owner, having to sell, right?
Mhm.
I try to approach each one as like, how can I have a conversation a little bit differently? How can I learn about what somebody's doing and then figure out how they're support? And then that's not to say I'm here just to talk about me, but
Yeah.
also, like you said, how do you build those bridges? How do you provide service in the relationship in addition to just showing up? So, do you find a lot of people maybe there's 2 or 3 times before they're able to build those bridges, or are they maybe jumping ship from these types of events before they actually get to the point where they are beneficial both to themselves and to the other person they're speaking to?
Yeah. People jump ship way too soon. And I think that just uh it's part of how society is right now. Like we
Okay.
are an immediate gratification society, and if I want to order something on Amazon, it will be at my house like 8 p.m. tonight.
Yeah. Yeah.
In fact, I think I could do 2 hour delivery. So, yeah, that's just way too fast. And
Yeah.
sales and relationship building does not work like that. Like you
Yeah.
need to have, and that's why it's so important that you understand the game plan and you have some strategy behind what you're doing because you have to invest so much time and energy into these relationships before they're ever going to pay dividends for you.
Yeah.
You don't want to just be shotgunning it and being like, oh, well, we'll see what happens. And then you're like a year down the road with somebody and you're like, well, this was a total waste of time. Like you need to understand who it is that you're trying to get in front of and
Hmm.
why. And then you can pour into that relationship knowing that I'm doing this, I'm kind of front loading, I'm making deposits into this relational bank account, knowing that at the end of it, I can ask for something in return.
Yeah.
And it's people do not think about the long game at all. And it's really disheartening to see how, and like
Yeah.
really smart people too, smart, successful people. There's probably the most common thing that I get is people will come to an event and they're like, oh, I didn't find any clients here. Like, this sucks. I'm going to go to the next thing. And I'm like, dude, that's not the point. Like,
Yeah.
if you took 2 seconds to think about, who these other folks are connected to,
Yeah.
like you're just not peeling the onion deep enough.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that is definitely a challenge. And I think it's partially if you're younger in business or you're new in business, people they want results and they want them now and they just can't wait and they don't have any runway left.
Hmm.
And in a lot of cases, I don't really want to hang out with those people anyway because they're
Yeah.
super desperate and you get
Yeah.
commission breath.
Yeah.
So
Well, and that's why I brought that up because I think that's been my experience. And I've, we're a part of a couple of the same groups as well, but I've seen this elsewhere where it's like, people come in and they join even like a digital group and it's like, hey, I'm just going to sell my business. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, I haven't sold anything, and I need to bring in revenue this month. And it's like, and they never take time to step back and say, well, what's the other person really trying to get out of this? I try to mentally go in and think of it as like a spider web. Like you said, it's like who is everybody else connected to? Because at the end of the day, it's like construction, right? It takes you 30 to 50% longer than you would want to. It probably costs, 20 to 30 to 50% more than you ever wanted to. You're building something, and building a network is no different than building a business, right? It's really the
yeah,
same thing.
yep, 100%. I used an example in a talk this morning. The mission to the moon. When we round numbers, I'll get the exact numbers wrong, but just round numbers, it's 250,000 miles or something like that.
Mhm.
And we used 1 million gallons of fuel. Well, we used 55% of that fuel to go the first 4 miles.
Wow.
And, so if you give up and you're like, oh my God, I'm burning too much energy. I'm putting too much into this. I'm never going to see any return, and you pull the plug on it too soon, like you come back, the shuttle would have come back down to Earth. You got to build a
Mhm.
new one. You got to refuel. You got to do it all over again. So I think a lot of people, they quit way too early. They don't realize that, how close they are or that you need to like just get that flywheel going. And
Mhm.
eventually when you get, I'm 20 years into this, 20 plus, like it's so easy. Like people just email me and they're like, hey, you got to meet this person. You got to, connect with this person. They're really cool. And, hey, go have a conversation here because they need this and that and the other thing. And it didn't happen overnight. It didn't even
Mhm.
happen the first 5 years. Like,
Mhm.
but if you can stick it out, it's really beneficial.
Yeah, and absolutely. And there are, as you're talking, I'm thinking about longevity in relationships and whatnot. And you actually did this. You said, "Hey, Nate, here's somebody else I think you should be interviewing because this person is just really cool." And I do this all the time. It's like, somebody comes to Colorado, who do I network with? Hey, you need to hit up Phil, right?
Yeah.
I did it with a woman in California as an example.
Yeah.
Where has and let's go maybe when you first started this out, going from, would you say an omnivert? But like how has this impacted your personal life? And because I think a lot of people think of networking as everything external, but in my mind, there's also a lot of internal things that happen, like articulation, communication, openness, and relationships. How has that helped or not helped you and your wife's relationship, specifically in the early stages?
Yeah. Well, I mean, for starters, I wouldn't have met my wife
Oh,
without,
interesting.
yeah. So that was a great
Check.
networking success story. Um, and it was I can trace it back to going to a networking meeting, which is kind of insane. I mean, it was like, see, this is the other thing that people don't, they go to these groups and they're like, well, that sucked. I didn't get anything out of it. But you met somebody, and then that person introduced you to somebody else, and then that person introduced you to somebody else. And, 5 years later, something turns up from it, and they're not tracking it back to the origin,
Mm,
and they're like,
mhm,
well, I didn't get anything out of it. It'd be very easy for me to look back on that experience with the networking group that I was in and say I didn't get anything out of that.
mhm.
But I met a guy who introduced me to this person, that person, so on and so forth, and eventually wind up meeting my wife at Oktoberfest in Germany.
That's awesome.
So yeah. Anyway, so um, I sorry, you got to say the question. I got
Oh, just like how is, yeah, I mean,
distracted.
just how
Personal life,
specifically
personal
in
life.
the early years has this helped you with your personal relationships?
Yeah, yeah. So I think learning how to, build rapport and, the bonding rapport stuff that you do that is so important in building and nurturing a networking relationship. All that stuff is the same in personal relationships.
Mhm.
And so, being able to listen, being able to ask questions, being able to be curious and not like one up people in their stories, that's all so beneficial in building a personal friendship and in a romantic relationship, and just being curious about the other person and having those uh, conversations and just letting them kind of naturally go where they're going to go,
Mhm.
and not having necessarily like an agenda. I think a lot of times
Mm.
people they're like, well, this is how I want this conversation to go, and I need to get XYZ result from this, and da da da. It's like that. Sure, in a perfect world, if you're gonna like try and plan everything out, that's fine.
Yeah.
That's not how the real world works.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it's been hugely beneficial in personal relationships, and just you learn so much stuff over the years, and you continue to grow. And I think that's another thing is like um, being on this constant journey of personal growth, personal development,
Mhm.
and trying to become a better version of yourself, which is always a good endeavor, no matter
Yep.
what.
Yep.
Um, but it's so important in becoming a better business person and becoming a better husband, father, whatever,
Yeah.
boss, like.
I agree, and I like the non-agenda piece of it. And you said something much more important, which resonated with me, which was like almost patience. It's like connecting the dots, right? You met with your wife, and
Hmm.
hey, I can track all these things back to the point where I met her in Germany, right? And now you have a child together, and you have a loving, wonderful relationship. But a lot of I feel like because I was like this, right? It was like I'm going to show up at this event, check the box, right? I did my duty. But actually, no good relationship comes out of one single interaction. There is something that comes out of it, and so I think just being aware, like you said, right? You use it almost I use it almost as a training ground for lack of a better term. But I was just thinking as you were speaking, my wife and I, when we were in San Francisco, my wife was in Toastmasters, right? And because
Hmm.
she was working on her public speaking, I also think this is a kind of style where people could get into it, those that don't want to public speak but get better at speaking. Hey, I'm going to go start networking. I'm going to start talking to people. I'm going to learn how to ask questions. I'm going to listen to their feedback. I'm going to look at their body language. So you can almost go in without really an agenda, but hey, these are the things I'm trying to work on for my own personal growth.
Yep.
Does anybody talk about it? Do you see that happening with a lot of people if they're not, even if they're not aware?
Yeah, I think so. And especially with people that are newer in business, because they don't have bad habits to break yet, and they,
True.
which a lot of us are at a point in business where we probably learned a few things the wrong way, and now we got to go back and say like, oh crap, that was wrong. Now I got to fix that, which is way more challenging than just learning it the right way from scratch. But
Yeah.
but yeah, there's a lot of people that come in and Nate is a good friend of mine, and he works with Firestorm now. He was that way. He came into Firestorm as a member 10 years ago, and he didn't really like he had a great network, but he didn't have the kind of network that he needed for the new sales job. And there was a lot of things that he was doing just sort of like naturally, but he didn't know the method to the madness. He was like, um, uh, it was unconscious competence. Like he
Interesting. I
was
like it.
he was doing it, but he didn't know why, or there was no like system to it.
Yeah.
And so he's been able to learn, and it's been cool to watch his growth over the last 10 years, where it's conscious competence now. Like
Hmm.
he's good at it, and he knows why he's good at it.
Yeah.
And now he can like teach it to other people. And so, yeah, there's a lot of that stuff that goes on where you learn ways to manage relationships, to build relationships, and practice stuff where like something simple like a 30-second introduction. Like, how do you explain in a short, succinct way what you do? And coming to a group like this, or going to an event and being able to just get a ton of reps on it, and
Hmm.
change the wording ever so slightly, and watch people's reactions and see how it lands with them. That kind of stuff is like invaluable.
Yeah. That's gold. That's gold. I've never thought about it in that capacity, but I'm just thinking through because in my own business life, right, I've been a part of a lot of different accelerators, incubators, things like that. And most businesses never go through that, but the structure of going through there where it's somebody telling you, here's your elevator pitch. It's 90 seconds. Don't waste time here, right? Get the feedback. It's really interesting because I never thought of it as being able to that can happen to be coached in a networking style. Is there a framework that you teach in your businesses when people come?
Yeah, absolutely. We've created some curriculum over the last 20 years, and now it's all
Nice.
in video format, and we've got a manual and all that stuff. And it's very granular. It's like, how do you write your 30-second introduction, or your elevator pitch, or your audio commercial? I don't really care what you call it. It's all the same thing. It's like, just tell me what you do,
Yeah.
and make sure it sticks. So there we talk about how to do that, how to manage a one-on-one meeting, a coffee meeting, how do you make that a valuable interaction for the both of you. So anyway, there's a lot of that stuff that's kind of cooked into our
Cool.
program. And when you join, it's yeah, I think sometimes people think of it, I'm going to a networking meeting, and then they realize like, oh shit, I signed up for like a business development program about networking. Like I didn't realize that. So
It's almost like there's intention of looking at what you're going to, right?
yeah, right. Yeah.
Um, and this is something I know it's obvious because you and I were in a couple of the same groups together, but it might not be for all audience members. One of the things that really surprised me is just accountability as the follow-up and what happens after the event. Because a lot of
Yeah.
people go, they show up, hey, I had this great thing, maybe I grabbed a business card, and then they don't do anything with it, right?
Yeah.
Can you
Yeah.
talk about the importance of follow-up after
Yeah.
the event, please?
Dude, I talk about this all the time, and I cannot tell you how many times I literally, at every single event that we do, like big event, I will get up in front of the room, and it's always half members, half guests, and I'm like, guys, follow up. The fortune is in the follow up. You need to follow up with people. And I tell them this story about how I've been in Colorado for 11 years now, and I've met like 6,000 or 7,000 people since I moved here. And I can count, I have to go to my toes now, but on all the digits, so under 20, uh, of how many people have actually followed up with me after an event. And I tell them that, hoping that they're all going to realize, like, hey, he wants us to follow up with him.
Yeah.
And I swear to God, it's, crickets.
Yeah.
So, yes, follow up is so, so, so important. You have to do it, and do it immediately. Just cook it into your schedule. So like, um, you know, whatever, however you time block your day. I'm not
Hmm.
here to tell you about management, time management. That's not my forte. Um, but you just do it. Make sure that you follow up with people, and the more you mentioned the group that we're in, the more um, inconvenient and the more effort you have to put into it, the better it is.
Yeah.
So writing somebody a handwritten thank you card is like the creme de la creme of follow up. If you want to send an email, that's fine too. If you send a text message, you give them a phone call, you make them a video or something like that. Just
Yeah.
do something. Like at the bare minimum, connect with them on LinkedIn and send them a little note that's like, "Hey, it was nice to meet you. Thanks for your time." Even if you don't think that they're going, if they're not a good connection now, or there's
Hmm.
no, path to doing business or partnership or anything like that,
Yeah.
you never know where that person's going to wind up. And it's
Yeah.
such a low effort thing to connect with somebody on LinkedIn and be like, "Hey, good to meet you. Maybe our paths will cross again." That's I don't know. I don't understand why people don't do that, but it is like the number one thing that I just harp on all the time. So
No, I'm glad I'm glad that came from you because I will reiterate that this is something I was really bad at. I actually had a business partner that was very very good at it, and we had a company policy actually. This is for a clothing business I had in San Francisco where we gave ourselves 24 hours to follow up with every single person that actually came to our event. And it
cool.
was for that reason. It was like you attended it. It was hundreds of people. So we would throw these big events and we would say, all right, we're just going to sit down, time block. You mentioned that. And so we're going to spend 2 hours and we're just going to send out these thank yous. They weren't handwritten, they were emails, but it was something. And
Hmm.
to your point, to me, it was number one about the reps, getting used to it, getting yourself in a routine of like, hey, this is what needs to happen. Two, you build rapport, you build up your reputation. I think that's the other thing people don't realize is you walk into these events and we've all heard kind of the first impressions are the lasting impression, right?
Yeah.
Well, this is your chance to make a good first and second impression, even if it was a bad first conversation. Hey, it was great meeting you. I learned this about you. Let's connect again sometime soon. But there's so much in that that can be unpacked, and yet people don't take that first step. Is that just laziness? Is it forgetfulness? Is it just because they're so focused on the outcome and not the relationship?
Yeah, I think it's all of that, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And I mean, we all fall into it, and it just takes a little bit of intentionality,
Mhm.
like putting it in your calendar, saying I'm going to do this, because I mean, we're all busy. We all have a million things going on. Like there's no shortage of stuff, that's demanding our time. And if you don't actually schedule it and say and get it in, get in a habit of doing these follow-ups, it just falls to the wayside. You're like, oh, I'll get to it tomorrow. Oh, I'll get to it on Friday. Oh, I'll get to it next week.
Mhm.
And you've got the best intentions, and it just never happens. I was actually thinking about this. So Mother's Day morning, we went to have donuts at this local donut shop down the street from us. And I've been going to that donut shop for 11 years now, and it's the same guy. He's always there every like 7 days a week. Dude's there. He gets there at 2 in the morning, starts baking donuts. He opens the shop at 4:30.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's crazy. And um, and I realized like I don't know anything about this guy. Like
Mm.
I go in there for donuts all the time. How easy would it be for me to just ask him a new question every time I'm in? Like, hey, where are you from? Oh, hey, what kind of car do you have? Oh, what'd you do this weekend? What's your favorite holiday? Like dumb shit that you could, build on, over the 10 years that you'd have this complete dossier on this person
Mm.
and a great relationship. And I still go in there and I'm like, hey, what's up? How you doing? Good. Okay, cool. I'll get a half a dozen of this.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
but it's just, you get in autopilot mode and you don't think about it. So
Yeah.
same thing, it's really the same with everything, but specifically with the follow-up stuff that we're talking about right now, you just got to schedule it.
Well, and I love that example because I mean you're a person who this is your business. This is your livelihood. You thrive on, relationships and you're realizing this. And I think it's just being self-aware. Like, what can I do?
Hmm.
It hits me too. I'll see the same person over and over. Or even if I'm just going to get a coffee and I don't know the person, honestly, like sometimes it's a struggle. How's your day going? Right? Like, let me give you a little smile, like ask them one question and people do, they warm up and it's amazing how I have a longer story which I'll share with you offline, but there was a woman at Safeway where I was getting something for my son's birthday party, and she was having the worst day, and I just asked her two questions, and I mean she completely flipped around, and it was a different relationship, and it put me in a better mood, and it definitely put her in a better mood. So I think
Yeah.
just being aware of that is a start for a lot of people.
Yep.
I wasn't planning on going here, but there is something that I wanted to ask you because you are a person that involves yourself with a lot of people.
Sure.
There is, and in a piece of habitual growth, a large piece is getting people to do more and really grow personally and professionally, but more so like raising your own personal standards.
Yeah.
We're well aware of the AI revolution, and you and I, you know, we have similar networks, so we understand all the big push for AI. We know a lot of people that are heavy, heavy, heavy into the business. How do you feel like networking and community is going to be changed with AI as it progresses?
Yeah. That's a it's a hefty question. And it's something that I've been thinking about because, in the past I've been very much like I'm an in-person kind of person. In fact, I called you before, this podcast, and I was like, "Hey, man, am I coming to your house, or are we doing this via Zoom?" Like that, my default setting is to be in person, shaking hands, kissing
Yeah,
babies,
yeah,
that
yeah,
kind of stuff. And so I think the AI thing is interesting. And really, what I think is going to happen is it's going to be a lot easier to get information about people to kind of fill in all the gaps on the stuff that you don't know,
mm,
and create a more, holistic picture of that person, and to help you, maybe develop more of a relationship with that person when you do have the time in
mm,
front of them, and be like, oh, okay, hey, I know you're part of this group, I know you're part of this thing, I know you're connected to this, network over here that I'm not. How can we, like, interact together? And some of that's going to be done automatically, and it'll kind of prompt you and show you those, connection points. um, it's ever going to replace the, one-on-one in-person relationship building. I mean, there's so much more stuff that happens when you sit down with somebody in person and you're
mm,
face to face. There's an energy exchange, and there's, all sorts of, nonverbal communication that happens. You get a little bit of it on Zoom, but it's not at all the same.
mm,
I
mm,
am curious to see what's going to happen when, the VR stuff starts to get,
yeah,
amped up. And, if you and I are both, we've got Apple headsets on, and, it's like a totally, like, we're in a sweet office together, and it doesn't really feel like we're virtual. Like,
yeah,
I see you, you see me, and it's all, the same. So yeah, I don't know. I think that it could be beneficial in a lot of ways. But I don't know that it's ever going to replace that, one-on-one in-person connection. And,
yeah,
frankly, I don't want it to.
yeah, yeah,
I thrive on that stuff. And especially in the small group settings where, you and I can sit down and have a coffee, or we can go for a hike, or, something like that.
yeah,
It's that to me is much more beneficial. And it's probably like the value of one of those hikes and going and talking in person for an hour is worth 10 Zoom conversations to me,
yep,
maybe
yep.
more.
Yep. So we're gonna have to do some hikes. I'm not gonna run with you. Sorry, Phil. I just
It's
don't have
okay.
any endurance for that. No, I agree. I've been thinking about this a lot. And I'm betting heavily that, AI is obviously gonna come, but people are going to I think society is gonna differentiate into two groups. I think it's gonna be people that are fine on the VR headsets that are just here. This is me. I'm gonna live in this virtual world. We're gonna connect and I think that works for them. For a person like me, sounds like for you as well. It's same thing. There's no replacement for giving somebody a hug or going on a ruck and going up a mountain, right? Having those in-person
Hmm.
conversations. And I'm betting heavily that people are going to start to really want to develop internally and start to realize more about themselves when they're forced because some of the other focus areas, resources that they need, that's going to be taken care of by the technology. And so
Yeah.
I actually really hope that is the case to gain focus on human connection and relationships because I think that is specifically with social media something that really hurts us today.
Yeah, 100%. One other thing I was going to mention is, I think, to your point, you said it was going to split into two groups, but I really think that it doesn't matter, how introverted you are or how, self-sufficient you can be online. Like, the human species craves connection and that relationship, and you need to have interactions with other people, and doing that online does not cut it.
Yep.
You need to get in a room with somebody, and it doesn't matter if you just sit there next to each other and, drink beer and watch a football game or whatever. Like, just being in the same space as somebody. And there's a lot of studies that show, that those connections will increase your lifespan, your life expectancy, by like not a small margin either. So you can add, years to your life by having a strong community and good interpersonal relationships. So I think people are going to, it's really cool and sexy and awesome, to play with all the AI stuff right now. And it's going to replace a lot of stuff that, we probably consider mundane and dumb, and make things more efficient. But at some point, there's going to be a little bit of a backlash, and people are going to go back and be like, wait a second, like
Yeah.
I need this, like, one-on-one interpersonal
Yeah.
connection with people, and I need to go out and like meet people outside of my house.
Yeah.
And I don't, you know I don't want to live my life behind a computer.
Yeah. Well, I mean, taking care of yourself and even, just exactly what you said. I think that there are basics of there are basic personal characteristics that people need and will need even interact with the technology, right? You still have to be articulate. You still have to be
Yeah.
able to creatively think. I mean, think of a huge push for things like prompt engineering, right? You can be fat and lazy in your basement and, type on a computer, but you're probably not going to live a long time. You're probably not going to be fulfilled. And maybe you are, but I think just there are basic communication things that come along with networking and dealing with other people that you still need to learn to interact, even if it is interacting with technology. So,
Yeah.
I found it fascinating. I'm gonna love to hear our thoughts after the next 6 months or so as this continues to progress. But let's wrap it up there, Phil. When it comes to networking, when it comes to people really getting out there and meeting others, what are, maybe two or three things that you would just strongly recommend for them to get started with?
Uh, have a goal, have an intention for what are you doing this for? What's the plan? What's the end result? What am I, trying to get out of this? And choose the events that you go to accordingly.
Yep.
And then when you go there, make, it's okay to just have a goal of like, oh, I just want to meet one person, or I want to, learn something new about this particular, topic. And as soon as you achieve that goal, give yourself permission to leave. Like, even if you paid $50 or $100 to go to the event and you're only there for 20 minutes, if you achieve your goal, you can leave. It's fine. And then, follow up with people. Like, it's so important,
The
so
number one
easy.
key, yes, 100%. Well, thank you, sir. You're the best of the best. I appreciate it. You shared a lot of great stuff here, so we'll leave it there, and I look forward to seeing you at the next event.
Absolutely, man. Thank you
All
so
right,
much for
appreciate your
having me.
time, Phil. Thank
See
you.
ya.